The grand orrery of the conclave hung in an impossible stillness, a sphere of captured starlight and polished obsidian that encompassed the entire chamber. Within its silent, cavernous heart, motes of light drifted like dust, each a star system, a nebula, a polity bound by ancient treaty and simmering distrust. The air, a carefully balanced composition of a dozen different atmospheric preferences, was thick with unspoken fear. Here, at the nexus of the ascended polities, gravity itself seemed to bend under the weight of a single, terrifying question. It was a question that had silenced the chittering hierarchies of the Cathar Imperium, muted the harmonic resonance of the Luminians, and frozen the crystalline thought processes of the Signian technocracy. The question was humanity, and more specifically, the ghost-like energy signature that had recently bloomed at the edge of their isolated home system, a system they called Sol. High Marshal Vorlag of the Cathar stood upon his designated dais, a towering figure of articulated obsidian carapace and limbs like sharpened blades. His voice, a low-frequency rumble that vibrated through the very floor, was the only sound in the orrery. We have observed it for 3 cycles. We have analyzed the gravimetric distortions. We have parsed the faint, leaking streams of data that our deepest probes can siphon from its quantum wake. The conclusion of every military and scientific caste within the Imperium is unanimous. The humans have constructed a weapon of such magnitude that it destabilizes the fundamental constants of any system it approaches. We do not understand its mechanism, but we understand its potential effect. It is not a planet killer. It is a star killer. It is a system ender. He paused, letting his words settle like a shroud over the assembled delegates. His multifaceted eyes, burning embers in the darkness of his armored head, swept across the chamber, settling on the floating, shimmering form of the Luminians. Emissary Lyra, your people have long advocated for patience regarding these unpredictable mammals. You spoke of their art, their philosophies of self-reflection, their capacity for what you termed grace. I ask you now, where is the grace in a weapon that can unmake a sun? Where is the philosophy in a warship that holds a blade to the throat of reality itself? Emissary Lyra, a being of coherent light and woven consciousness, pulsed with a soft, sorrowful luminescence. Her voice was not a sound but a wave of thought, translated by the conclave's nexus into a melody of chimes and soft tones that every species could comprehend. High Marshal, your fear is a logical extension of the data, and fear has its uses, but it is a poor lens through which to view the unknown. The humans have never brandished this vessel. They have not threatened us. They have not expanded beyond their cradle system in any aggressive capacity. They remain silent, as they have been for the centuries since we first became aware of them. Silence is not an indicator of peace, Vorlag's rumble intensified, causing the starmotes nearest his dais to tremble. It is the posture of an ambush predator. They have observed us. They know of the conclave. They have seen our fleets, our worlds. They have built this abomination, in secret in the dark. For what purpose does a species build a weapon that can extinguish a star if not to use it? Do you believe they constructed it to illuminate their tedious literature? To compose their discordant music? The debate was not new, but the stakes had never been higher. For generations, the conclave had watched humanity from afar. They were a galactic anomaly, a species that had risen to technological prominence with terrifying speed, yet seemed pathologically prone to self-destruction. They had warred with themselves using atomic fire, poisoned their own biosphere, and built ideologies that celebrated the very tribalism the conclave had spent millennia evolving beyond. Yet from that same chaotic crucible emerged wonders. They had reached for their moon on pillars of chemical flame while still fighting brutal wars on their own soil. They composed symphonies of profound emotional depth, and then used similar frequencies to guide munitions. They were a paradox, a species of brilliant, violent, compassionate, and terrified contradictions. The conclave had deemed them too unstable for formal contact, classifying them as a nascent volatile civilization, to be observed but not engaged. But the energy signature had changed everything. It was not a technology the conclave could comprehend. It did not operate on principles of mass energy conversion or kinetic force. The readings were subtle yet terrifying. The vessel seemed to warp causality on a local level. It did not move through space so much as it persuaded space to be different around it. The Cathar, a species whose entire culture was built upon the tangible realities of force and strategic positioning, were driven to a state of near frenzy by its existence. They could not fight what they could not understand. The core of the issue is not the vessel's existence, Lyra chimed, her light softening into a placid blue. It is the nature of humanity itself. We have only ever viewed them through the narrow keyhole of long-range sensors and intercepted transmissions. We see their wars, their struggles. We have not seen their hearts. Power is not inherently malevolent, High Marshal. It is an amplifier of intent. We fear this weapon because we imagine what the Cathar Imperium would do with it. We have not yet considered what humanity intends to do with it. A new voice, dry and crackling like shifting sand, entered the discourse. It was the delegate from the Signian technocracy, a collective of silicon-based lifeforms encased in environmental suits of polished chrome. Intent is a variable. Capability is a constant. The humans now possess the capability to erase any member polity of this conclave from existence in a single, unpreventable strike. The logic of self-preservation dictates that such a capability cannot be permitted to exist in the hands of an uninducted, unvetted, and demonstrably unstable species. The technocracy recommends a preemptive diplomatic overture, a demand for immediate decommissioning, backed by the full military might of the conclave. If they refuse, we will have our answer regarding their intent. The Signian position was the cold, hard fulcrum upon which the debate now rested. It was the middle ground between the Cathar's call for an immediate military strike and the Luminians' plea for passive observation. But it was an ultimatum, and ultimatums had a predictable way of ending in fire. Vorlag slammed a massive, clawed hand onto his dais. The impact sent a shockwave of sound through the chamber. An ultimatum is the only path. We will assemble our fleets. The might of the Imperium, the precision of the technocracy, the ancient starbenders of every polity represented here. We will move as one to the edge of their system. We will show them what true power looks like, the power of a unified galaxy. We will give them a choice. Surrender their doomsday weapon, or be extinguished by a power they cannot possibly comprehend. And in doing so, Lyra's thoughts washed over them, a cool tide against Vorlag's heat. We become the very monsters we fear they might be. We would be using overwhelming force to annihilate a potential threat, based on assumptions and fear. Is that the principle upon which the conclave was founded? Was it not forged in the ashes of the great preemptive wars, a promise that we would never again allow fear to guide our hand to a trigger? The silence that followed was different. It was heavier, laced with the ghosts of history. Every delegate present knew the stories. They knew of the civilizations erased, the worlds burned, the species hunted to extinction in the name of galactic security before the conclave brought a fragile peace. Lyra's words had touched the deepest scar in their collective psyche. Vorlag, for the first time, seemed to hesitate. His posture remained aggressive, but the certainty in his resonant voice was fractured. That was a different era. The threats were comprehensible. This human vessel is a fundamental alteration of the rules of existence. It is not a bigger sword emissary. It is the death of the very concept of swords. Before Lyra could respond, a soft, insistent chime echoed through the orrery. It was the alert from the central nexus, an intrusion so rare it caused every delegate to focus their attention on the swirling heart of the chamber. A data stream was opening. It was not a probe, not a hack, not an unauthorized entry. It was a formal, standard diplomatic communication protocol, a protocol so ancient and formal that it hadn't been used in centuries, and it was originating from the Sol system. A collective stillness, a held breath across a dozen species, descended upon the grand orrery. The humans were talking. After centuries of silence, as the conclave debated their annihilation, they had chosen this exact moment to speak. The Nexus translated the incoming signal, not into sound or thought, but into a simple, universal glyph of greeting that materialized in the center of the chamber. And then, a figure coalesced from particles of light on the central dais. It was not a soldier. It was not a warrior clad in power armor. It was a single, small, bipedal mammal, clad in simple, dark blue fabric. The human was female, her face pale and her dark hair tied back. Her expression was utterly, unnervingly calm. Behind her, the hololithic projection showed not a war room or a bridge filled with armored soldiers, but a quiet, sparse room with a single window that looked out onto the deep, stardusted black of space. "I am Ambassador Evelyn Reed of the Terran Alliance," she said, her voice perfectly Tran. Slated was steady, measured, and devoid of any discernible aggression or fear. It was the voice of a scholar or a philosopher, not a conqueror. "I am authorized to speak on behalf of the people of Earth and her colonies. We are aware of your deliberations. We have with respect been monitoring the conclave's communications regarding our vessel, the Vindication. We understand your concern." The sheer audacity of her statement sent a ripple of shock through the assembly. They had been monitored. Their most secure, quantum-entangled communications penetrated and understood by a species they had dismissed as nascent. Vorlag's carapace plates shifted with a grinding sound, a clear sign of rising fury. The Signians remained unnervingly still. Only Lyra's light seemed to brighten with a profound, consuming curiosity. "You admit to espionage, then?" Vorlag boomed, his voice dripping with menace. "You have listened to the private council of the Ascended Polities." Ambassador Reed met his holographic gaze without flinching. "We have listened to the concerns of our galactic neighbors. It would be irresponsible not to. You were debating our extinction based on incomplete data. We felt it was necessary to intervene before a tragic error was made. An error that would have been primarily, though not exclusively, to your detriment." The quiet, factual threat hung in the air, more chilling than any roar. It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of fact. The chamber was silent, the delegates processing the implications. This small, fragile-looking being was speaking with the serene confidence of a creature that held an incontrovertible advantage. "You speak of incomplete data," the Signian delegate crackled, its voice a cascade of static. "Clarify the vessel, the vindication, its function, its purpose. Provide complete data now, or we will proceed with the assumption that it is a weapon of galactic-scale destruction." Ambassador Reed gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That is a fair and logical request, and it is why I am here. Words, I have found, are often insufficient to convey a new reality. They are too easily colored by assumption and fear. Therefore, I am not here to simply talk. I am authorized to provide you with a demonstration of the Vindication's primary function." Vorlag let out a short, guttural pulse of sound that was the Cathar equivalent of a contemptuous laugh. "A demonstration? You will display your power for us. Will you snuff out a star in some desolate system to prove your might? We will not be intimidated, human." "There will be no destruction, High Marshal," Reed replied, her calm utterly unshaken. "That is not the Vindication's purpose. We require a target, but not one of life or stability. We have identified a suitable candidate within your charted space, a location that has long been a source of navigational hazard and scientific concern for the Conclave. A system on the galactic fringe, designated by your astronomers as the Maelstrom of Chorus. It contains a stellar remnant, an unstable, medium-mass black hole whose erratic gravitational tides have been slowly consuming the outer worlds of that dead system for millennia. We ask for your permission to deploy the Vindication to that system. Direct your sensors there. Watch what it does. And then we may continue our discussion with a more complete understanding." A murmur swept through the orrery. The Maelstrom of Chorus was a well-known anomaly. It was a festering wound in the fabric of spacetime, a chaotic, unpredictable singularity that defied conventional stellar physics. Several survey ships had been lost there over the centuries. To send a vessel, there was a risk. To promise to do something to a black hole was a claim of such hubris it bordered on insanity. Emissary Lyra's light pulsed brightly. "A demonstration of this nature is unprecedented, but it is also an act of transparency. I, on behalf of the Luminian Compact, consent to this observation. Let us see what humanity offers not in words but in action." The Signian delegate crackled its assent after a moment of processing. "The logic is sound. An empirical demonstration is preferable to speculation." All eyes, all thoughts turned to Vorlag. The High Marshal stood rigid, his entire being radiating suspicion. To refuse was to show fear, to accept was to walk into a potential trap, but his warrior's pride and a burning curiosity to see this impossible ship in action won out. "The Imperium will watch," he rumbled. "Send your vessel, human, let us see the truth of this Vindication. But be warned. Any sign of deception, any hint of aggression, and my fleets will burn a path to your world." Ambassador Reed simply nodded again. "Understood, High Marshal. The Vindication is already en route. It will arrive at the Chorus system in approximately one of your standard temporal units. Please observe." Her holographic image did not vanish. It remained a silent, watching presence. In the center of their galaxy, her calm gaze fixed upon the orrery as a tiny mote of light representing the Maelstrom of Chorus began to glow, signifying that the eyes of 100 worlds were now turned upon it. The test had begun. The long wait was a study in galactic tension. On the main hololithic display in the orrery, a real-time sensor feed from a dozen different long-range observatories focused on the Maelstrom of Chorus. The image was a swirling vortex of distorted starlight and accretion disk energies, a cosmic whirlpool with a heart of absolute black. It was a familiar, ugly scar on the star charts, a place of endings. High Marshal Vorlag stood unmoving, his limbs crossed in a posture of rigid skepticism, his mind already calculating fleet vectors and weapon trajectories for the inevitable betrayal. The Signian delegate had gone silent, its chrome casing reflecting the chaotic light of the distant black hole as it processed terabytes of incoming sensor data per second. Emissary Lyra was a soft, anxious nebula of violet light, her thoughts a silent prayer for understanding over destruction. And in the center of it all, Ambassador Evelyn Reed waited. She did not pace. She did not fidget. She simply stood, a small, still point of calm in a chamber buzzing with the anxiety of ancient powers. Her very presence was a psychological weapon of immense effectiveness. Her serenity suggested a profound confidence, not in a weapon's power, but in a fundamental truth that the Conclave had not yet grasped. Then it arrived. There was no flash of light, no tearing of spacetime, no grand arrival. One moment the space near the maelstrom was empty. The next, the vindication was there. It simply resolved into existence as if it had always been there and the universe had only just remembered. The ship itself was a profound disappointment to those expecting a vessel of war. It was not a bristling behemoth of armor and weapon ports like a Cathar dreadnought. It was long, slender, and graceful, a seamless fusion of pearlescent white material and lines of soft, internal blue light. It looked less like a warship and more like a work of art, a sculptor's interpretation of a living thing designed to swim through the stars. It was beautiful, and its beauty was somehow more unnerving than any weapon. "It is small," Vorlag rumbled, his voice laced with a confusion that bordered on insult. "The energy readings, they do not match this ornament." "Size is a primitive metric for power, High Marshal," Ambassador Reed's voice echoed softly in the chamber. "Please, continue your observation." The Vindication moved. It did not fire engines or thrusters. It simply glided toward the chaotic accretion disk of the black hole, an act of suicidal folly by any known standard of physics. The gravitational forces should have torn it apart, the radiation should have cooked its systems. But it sailed through the swirling debris and superheated gas as if passing through a gentle fog. A low, harmonic hum registered on the Conclave's most sensitive instruments, a frequency that seemed to soothe the violent energies around the ship, creating a pocket of calm in the heart of the storm. It stopped at the edge of the event horizon, poised over the point of no return. Then it began its work. Projections not of energy or matter but of pure structured light extended from the ship. They formed a complex, shimmering geometric cage around the singularity itself. It was a lattice of impossible angles and glowing, intersecting lines, a mathematical construct given physical form. The maelstrom, the chaotic engine of destruction, was being contained within a web of light. "What is this?" the Signian delegate crackled, the static in its voice rising. "This is not a weapon. This is an engineering project. The energy expenditure is astronomical, yet the output is purely structural." The lattice of light began to contract. As it did, the chaotic gravitational tides of the maelstrom began to smooth out. The wild, unpredictable warping of spacetime became rhythmic, stable. The accretion disk, instead of being violently consumed, began to orbit in a perfect, stately spiral. The black hole was not being destroyed. It was being tamed. "They are not attacking it," Lyra's thoughts washed through the chamber, filled with dawning, world-shattering awe. "They are healing it." The final stage was the most reality-bending of all. As the lattice of light compressed to a single point, it did not detonate. It folded inward, taking the singularity with it. For a single, terrifying moment, the black hole vanished. The space where it had been was a perfect, silent void, a hole in the universe. Then the light returned, not as a cage, but as a single, stable point. A new star. It was small, a white dwarf, but it was stable, its light clean and pure. The gravitational chaos was gone. The maelstrom of Chorus was no more. In its place was a quiet, orderly system with a new, tiny sun at its heart. The Vindication had not destroyed a threat. It had performed an act of cosmic restoration. It had reversed entropy. It had stared into the abyss and forced the abyss to become a source of light. A silence deeper and more profound than any that had come before fell over the grand orrery. The delegates, beings who commanded armadas and ruled star-spanning empires, were utterly, completely stunned. They had come prepared for a display of terrible power, a reason to go to war. They had been shown an act of creation so advanced it bordered on the divine. Vorlag was the first to speak, his rumbling voice stripped of its arrogance, leaving only a raw, hollow shock. "How?" Ambassador Reed finally allowed a small, faint smile to touch her lips. The Vindication is not a warship in the sense that you understand it, High Marshal. Your sensors were not wrong about its power. They were wrong about its purpose. You detected a vessel capable of manipulating the fundamental constants of reality. You assumed its purpose was to unmake things. That is a failure of imagination, not of instrumentation. She gestured to the image of the now peaceful chorus system. The Vindication is an ontological stabilization engine. It is a steward's tool. Its primary function is to correct existential threats to the galactic ecosystem. Runaway von Neumann probes, vacuum decay events, unstable stellar phenomena, artificial plagues designed to rewrite planetary biospheres. It is a tool of preservation. Its power is not to kill, but to affirm the right of existence against the encroaching chaos of the universe. The Cygnian delegate's voice was a whisper of static. The energy required, the computational power to model and rewrite local physical law on that scale. It is beyond the theoretical limits of our science. It is impossible. It was impossible for us, too, for a very long time, Reed said. We did not achieve this through conventional science alone. We achieved it by understanding the universe not as a collection of matter and energy, but as a system of information. The Vindication does not destroy or create in a physical sense. It edits. It rewrites the base code of reality. It found an error in the chorus system, an unstable singularity, and it corrected the error. Vorlag took a heavy step forward on his dais. His mind, forged in the brutal logic of war, was struggling to reorient itself. But it can be used as a weapon. A tool that can rewrite a sun can unwrite a sun. A ship that can repair spacetime can surely shatter it. It is the ultimate weapon, regardless of its primary function. You are correct, High Marshal, Reed said, and her agreement was more disarming than any denial. It is, without question, the most powerful weapon ever conceived. In the wrong hands, it could erase a civilization from existence so completely that it would be as if it never existed at all. It could delete a species from the timeline. We are not naive about what we have built. She paused, her calm gaze sweeping over all of them, the warrior, the philosopher, the machine. And that is the final piece of data you were missing. Not about the ship, but about us. We humans have a unique and terrible history. We are the only species we know of that has come to the brink of self-annihilation not once, but multiple times, through our own technological progress. We have held the fire of our own sun in our hands and very nearly used it to burn our world to ash. That experience, it changes a species. It instills a caution that is bone deep. It teaches you that the greatest threat is not the enemy without, but the flawed ambition within. So we built the Vindication with safeguards, she continued. Not just technological, but philosophical. Its weaponized functions, the ability to edit a sentient species or their worlds, are locked. They cannot be accessed by any single human or even by our entire government. The protocols for their use can only be unlocked by a consensus we deliberately designed to be impossible for us to achieve alone. She looked directly at Emissary Lyra, then at the Cygnian, and finally at the stunned High Marshal Vorlag. The system requires the willing, conscious, and simultaneous assent of a council of minds representing fundamentally different philosophical frameworks. A mind rooted in logic and data. A mind rooted in empathy and cosmic balance. A mind rooted in strategy and the understanding of conflict. And of course, a mind representing humanity's own flawed, hopeful nature. In short, to use the Vindication as a weapon, we require you. The implication of her words crashed down on the assembly with the force of a physical blow. It was not a trick. It was not a treaty. It was an act of unilateral, unconditional trust, so profound it was almost incomprehensible. Humanity had built the most powerful tool in the history of the galaxy, and in an act of supreme wisdom born of supreme suffering, they had given the keys to their potential partners, their potential rivals, their potential enemies. They had made themselves accountable to the very galaxy they could have so easily dominated. You would give your enemies a veto over your ultimate weapon, Vorlag whispered, the concept so alien to Cathar philosophy that he could barely give it voice. We would not see you as enemies, Reed corrected gently. We would see you as partners in the most profound responsibility one can imagine, the stewardship of galactic existence. We did not build the Vindication to rule the galaxy. We built it to ensure there is a galaxy left to rule. We offer you not a seat on a council to govern humanity, but a key to a system designed to protect all of us from the threats we can see and the threats we have not yet imagined. The power is too great for one species to wield. It was never intended to be. The grand orrery of the conclave, for the third time that day, fell utterly silent. But this was not the silence of fear or tension. It was the silence of revelation, the silence of a paradigm shattering. The mystery of humanity was not in their chaotic nature, but in the profound and terrible wisdom it had forged. They were not unpredictable warriors. They were repentant gods, and they were asking for help bearing the burden of their own power. Emissary Lyra's form glowed with a brilliant, pure white light, a beacon of understanding in the ancient chamber. The Cathar High Marshal stood with his head bowed, his warrior's pride not broken but reshaped into something new, respect. The age of fear was over. The age of partnership was about to begin. The formal proceedings that followed were a mere formality, a ritual to codify a truth that had already settled into the consciousness of every delegate in the orrery. The conclave of ascended polities voted, not on sanctions or war, but on an immediate and full alliance with the Terran alliance of humanity. The Cathar Imperium, in a gesture that stunned the other members, offered to share the patrol routes of their most decorated fleets, not to contain humanity, but to protect the space around the Sol system, designating it a sector of supreme galactic importance. The Cygnian technocracy opened diplomatic channels to begin the slow, meticulous process of integrating their computational networks with the ethical oversight systems of the Vindication. The Luminians, through emissary Lyra, began to draft the philosophical and ethical charters that would govern the new Joint Council, a document that would become the foundation of galactic law for millennia to come. Ambassador Evelyn Reed remained on the central dais, a constant, reassuring presence as the old order gave way to a new, more hopeful one. She answered questions with unflinching honesty, detailing humanity's long and painful journey toward this moment of maturity. She spoke of their great filters, the nuclear standoffs, the ecological collapses, the genetic plagues, and how each brush with extinction had burned away a layer of their arrogance, leaving behind a core of resilient, cautious wisdom. To the assembled ancient races, it was as if they were listening to an elder, not a child. Humanity had aged 1,000 lifetimes in the span of a few turbulent centuries, their growth accelerated by the fires of their own making. High Marshal Vorlag approached the dais after the formal vote, his massive form moving with a newfound deference. "Ambassador Reed," he rumbled, his voice quiet and shorn of its earlier aggression. "My people value strength above all things. For my entire life I have defined strength as the ability to impose one's will upon others. Today you have shown me a strength I did not know existed, the strength to restrain one's own power, the strength to trust. The Cathar Imperium is honored to stand with such warriors." "We are not warriors, High Marshal," Reed corrected, her tone gentle but firm. "We are survivors, and survival has taught us that the greatest victory is not in winning a war but in preventing one. We are honored to stand with you." As this new, unprecedented era of cooperation began to dawn, a final piece of the human puzzle fell into place. The integration of the Cygnian and human systems was the first true test of the alliance. The Cygnians, with their machine-like precision, began interfacing with the Vindication's deep archives, verifying the ethical locks and fail-safes that Reed had described. The process was slow, a delicate dance between two vastly different technological philosophies. And it was in the deepest, most shielded layers of the ship's memory core that they found it. A new alert chimed through the orrery, not a communication request, but an automated diagnostic signal originating from the Vindication itself. On the main hololithic display, the serene image of the new star in the chorus system was replaced by a complex cascade of symbols and ancient air data. It was a signal that had been buried in a dormant subroutine, programmed to activate only under a specific set of circumstances. The first full-power deployment of the ontological engine in the presence of and in cooperation with a non-human intelligence. The conditions had just been met. "What is this?" the Cygnian delegate crackled, its voice tinged with an electronic equivalent of alarm. "This is not a human signal. It is embedded within their systems, but its structure, its age. It predates their species. It predates us." The data stream resolved into a coherent message, a message that spoke not to their translators, but directly to their consciousness, a whisper from a ghost so old the universe had forgotten its name. It was not a message of greeting. It was a warning. Images flooded their minds, not rendered in light, but imprinted as pure knowledge. They saw a galaxy teeming with life, a civilization of beings that had transcended physical form, their world's vast, continent-sized computational engines woven into the fabric of spacetime. This civilization was ancient beyond reckoning, their power making the conclave's own seem primitive. They were the original builders, the architects of the technology that humanity had somehow rediscovered or inherited. They had built a network of what they called vindicators, cosmic lighthouses designed to protect the delicate bloom of life against the harshness of the void. Then the images changed. They saw the arrival of the threat. It was not an armada, it was not a conquering species. It was something far worse. It was a creeping, silent nullity, a form of anti-information, an extragalactic blight that did not destroy but erased. It was a tide of cosmic static that advanced from the intergalactic void, and wherever it touched, existence ceased. Not just life, but matter, energy, causality, and even the memory that something had ever been there were gone. It was a metaphysical cancer, the heat death of meaning itself. The ancient civilization fought back. They deployed their entire network of vindicators, not as tools of restoration, but as weapons desperately trying to rewrite the encroaching nullity to reinforce the informational structure of their reality. The images showed entire star clusters being reinforced, their quantum states hardened against the erasure. But the tide was endless. The silence was patient. The final imprint was of a galaxy going dark, star by star, not in explosions, but in quiet, final fades to black. One by one, the ancient vindicators fell silent. The last part of the message was a single, desperate burst of information, a final seed of hope cast into the future. It contained a schematic, far more advanced than even the human version of the vindication. And it contained a set of coordinates, a point in the vast, empty darkness of the void between galaxies. It was the source point of the encroaching silence. The message ended with a final, heartbreaking plea, a thought that echoed across a billion years of emptiness. It is coming, the great unmaking, the final silence. We are gone. Our knowledge is all that remains. We could not stand alone, stand together, vindicate existence. Do not let the universe fall silent. The message faded, leaving behind only the star map with the horrifying coordinates blinking in the void. The grand orrery of the conclave, the seat of power for the known galaxy, was once again silent. But for the first time it felt small. The political squabbles, the centuries of mistrust, the fear of a single human warship, all of it was rendered utterly, laughably insignificant. Ambassador Reed stood beside High Marshal Vorlag and Emissary Lyra, the three of them, human, Cathar, and Luminian, staring up at the map. The conflict that had brought them to the brink of war was a footnote, a prelude to a story so vast and terrifying it defied comprehension. So this is why, Lyra's thoughts came, soft and trembling. This is humanity's purpose, not to conquer, but to prepare. You are not building a weapon against us. You are building a shield for all of us against a war you already knew was coming. Evelyn Reed shook her head, her face pale but resolute. We didn't know, not like this. We found the blueprints, the seed of this technology in a ruin on our fourth planet, Mars. We thought it was just a tool. We never received the full message, until now. Until we proved we were ready to work with others. The original builders wanted to ensure their legacy wouldn't fall into the hands of a species that would use it for conquest. Vorlag looked from the map to the human ambassador. His warrior's mind was finally grasping the true scale of the battlefield. The enemy was not another fleet or another empire. The enemy was oblivion itself. The ultimate human warship, he said, the words a quiet revelation. We thought it was too powerful to exist. We were wrong. It is not powerful enough. Not yet. Not alone. The three leaders stood together, united not by treaty or by choice, but by a shared, cosmic imperative. The fear of each other was gone, burned away by the cold dread of a silent, empty universe. Humanity, the chaotic, unpredictable newcomers, had not brought war to the galaxy. They had brought a warning, a purpose, and a terrible, necessary hope. Their ultimate warship was never meant to stand for conquest or for glory. It was a vessel whose power was so immense, so absolute, that its only conceivable purpose was to stand for the right of everything to simply be. And in the encroaching darkness, the newly united galaxy would need it.